I really like the idea that you talked about that morning because so many women don't give themselves permission to take care of themselves in the morning.
So this is it, ladies. This is it. If this is midlife and you've launched your kids and you've got your mornings back, this is the time. This is the time to find the joy that Glennis and I have found in the mornings. Because I am an early riser. I get up between 5 and 6 in the morning, and it is glory. Take your mornings back. Now is the time. Midlife is the time to take it back, because if you're not getting healthy now, if you've struggled, you've raised your kids, you poured from your cup that is now empty, now is the time to fill it, because on the other side, it's not so great.
Hi, I'm Glennis Woods-Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. The reality is we all have to have sometimes where maybe we don't eat as healthy as we would like to eat. And considering that we are midlife women, sometimes that can be very costly in terms of how we're feeling. Our digestive processes work differently, and we have to be more aware about what we put in our bodies. But for those times where we weren't aware or we just ignored the warning signs, this is where my guest can really help you. I have with me today Melissa, is it Hall-Klepacki?
Melissa Hall-Klepacki.
Melissa Hall-Klepacki, and she's a wellness expert dedicated to helping people overcome health challenges and achieve optimal well-being. And today we're going to be focusing on something that we just don't talk enough about, but it seems like we all have had this challenge, especially as we're aging, and that is constipation. The topic of constipation, I know it's not glamorous, but oh my gosh, can't you tell how it can impact your life when you are going through it? And can't you tell how much better you feel when you are not? So today, Melissa's going to be sharing with us some tips and things of what we can do preventatively, and also some information about why this happens in the first place. Melissa, thank you so much for being on the V.I.B.E Living podcast. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks, Glennis. I'm so happy to be here. I'm always happy to talk about constipation and poop. I know it's a tough subject, as you said, but as I like to say, talking about constipation isn't sexy, but constipation isn't sexy.
No, it's not, but it's a necessary topic, and I think we all have suffered from it. It's one time or another. But tell me this: why is it that constipation seems to come up more as we age?
Honestly, because of a lifetime of toxins. We are continually picking up toxins as we age. Our livers start to work a little less efficiently. We tend to move our bodies a little slower. We're breathing generally more shallowly. We tend to be living stressful lives. A lot of us have kids that have gotten out of that very stressful toddler stage only to be replaced by bigger kids with bigger problems, right? When we got those teenage kids and beyond. Stress plays a big factor in that. And I think a lot of habits, a lifetime of habits will catch up with you.
Yes.
And when we talk about constipation, I was a victim of really bad gut health in right around 2016. I was suffering for a long time with Lyme disease and co-infections and was put on a lot of medications that really caused a lot of problems in my gut. And I was really desperate for help with constipation and bloating and irregularity, and it was really impacting my life. And I went to a gastroenterologist, and he simply said, drink more water, eat more fiber, take some Miralax. And I said, okay. I made my notes. And I said, so for how long? And he said, until you're fixed. And I said, well, what's going to fix me? That's a Band-Aid. And he just went,
exactly, treating the symptoms.
And so I left that practice and I went to functional medicine, and she ran an in-depth gut study on me, and I had wiped out all of my good bacteria. I wasn't even able to process fiber. Every time I tried to eat things with fiber, I would wind up bloated like a tick. And the reason is because I didn't have the good bacteria there. And so without that test, I wouldn't have known that. And without that test, I could have tried to replace good bacteria, but not knowing what you're replacing, what needs replacing, is really like a big giant gas, and it's an expensive gas.
Yes, it's interesting because people don't realize that we do have good bacteria, saprotrophic bacteria that's in our gut, and then we also have bad bacteria. And what happens a lot of times after a lifetime of just living, as you said, with toxins, but especially if you've had antibiotics and medication and other kinds of things like that, it kills the good bacteria, and basically you are left kind of undefended in your gut in terms of warding off all the toxins and things that we are exposed to in the course of a lifetime. So, given that, what kinds of things can we do, first of all, preventatively to help improve our gut health?
Right. So probiotics and enzymes are always recommended in the alternative world. And yes, they're great, but you need to know what you need. And we need to always understand the why. And that's what, and really, like, you can try things as a normal person without a medical background trying to improve your gut health. You can eat fermented foods. Highly recommended. Take probiotics. We know we need them. You just won't know which ones to take, but still a recommended practice. Avoid things that are terrible for your gut health. We know that artificial sweeteners decimate the gut good bacteria. We know that antibiotics, a course of antibiotics can take 6 months to a year to recover from. A lot of the foods that we're eating that are highly processed with the high fructose corn syrups and the seed oils are not doing wonders for our gut. We need to eat to feed our gut. And I like to talk about the gut as a garden. For
Mm,
people, the word microbiome is thrown around a lot, and a lot of people, I think, don't understand the word. It's complicated what's happening in our bodies. But most of the bacteria that we're talking about when we talk about gut health is in the large intestine and in the last part of the large intestine. So when we do the stool test, right, that's what we're looking at, the stool. And we're looking at good bacteria, we're looking at bad bacteria. We're able to look at whether people are sensitive to gluten. That
mm,
there's another one for people who are having a lot of gut problems. I highly recommend a gluten-free, lactose-free, so gut gluten and dairy-free diet for 30 days to see if that makes a difference. And realistically, it's not so much the gluten, it's the glyphosate. It's the chemicals that are sprayed in this country on our food that are not happening in other parts of the world that's taking down our gut health and making the gluten react in our systems. And the dairy for a lot of people will shut down your bowels almost as much as an opioid drug. If you've ever had to take a medication after a surgery, they always hand you a medication and some sort of laxative because they know it's going to constipate you. Milk can
wow.
do the same thing for people. So if you're out there, you're listening, you're like, I'm really constipated. I have a lot of people that come and say, I poop once a week. I've pooped my whole life once a week.
Mm.
And that's been their normal. So they didn't
And
really
the
think too much about it.
and the normal should be what?
Every day. Once a day, every day, preferably in the morning.
Right,
That's what I work towards with all my clients. And it's so important because that daily elimination, you should think of as getting rid of the garbage,
right.
taking out the trash. If you had a house and you let your garbage back up for a week, wouldn't be so nice in there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what we can do when we get constipated to relieve ourselves and what else we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The second part of that question is my answer, right? That's the world that I live in. Quick fixes for constipation are there. You have tons of them. Western medicine offers them. Go to CVS, pick up a laxative, you'll have a bowel movement. If you are trying to go with a gentler route to provoke a bowel movement, you can use something like a magnesium citrate.
Hmm.
However, you need to be careful with dosing because it will cause what I call disaster pants if you take too much. And you got to
Right.
be careful. You want to make sure that if you're ever experimenting with anything that's going to cause any kind of laxative effect, that you're home and prepared, right? So I
Mhm.
don't love quick fixes. I mean, you can try
Mm,
things like MCT oil in your morning coffee to lubricate from the inside out. There
mm,
are a squatty potty. Make sure you're in the right position when you're pooping. Making sure you're getting exercise because if you're not moving your body, you're not moving your bowels. Making sure you're getting enough water. Very important. Not only enough water, but water with electrolytes. If you're the kind of person that's like, every time I drink more water, I just pee all the time, the water's not getting into your cells.
mm.
It's running right through your body. So I recommend for all my clients to start your day with a big glass of water with electrolytes. Every water that follows that it'll help that to stay in your body.
Now, when you say water with electrolytes, what are you talking about? Is that a particular kind of water to get, or can you add electrolytes to your water?
You can add electrolytes to your water. And that's a
Hmm.
wonderful question that I could take 2 hours and talk about, Dennis. Water in this country, if you're drinking tap water, it is not safe.
Right.
The number of chemicals in our tap water is astounding. And if you're saying you're listening and you're like, not my tap water, please go to this website, www.ewg.org. It stands for Environmental Working Group. It's an amazing group that works to safeguard us from chemicals and toxic exposures. So ewg.org/tap water. When you go to that website, you put in your zip code, it will pull up your water company and it will give you a full report of what's in your water.
Wow.
Please
I've
sit
been to that
down
site before.
before you open it because it's
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah, it is. It really is shocking. I don't even want to wash my clothes in that water. You know, it is
But the
shocking.
beauty is, and so everyone can take a breath now, they give you advice. They say if you have these kinds of chemicals, you should be doing this kind of water filtering. The
Mm.
refrigerator filter is not cutting it. The Brita filter really is not cutting it. In my house, I have a water distiller. The mechanism of that is it boils water, it collects the steam vapor, all of the solids fall to the bottom, everything else is boiled out, and I'm drinking that steam vapor that is then condensed back into water. I add liquid minerals back in to make sure that I'm mineralized, but that's what
Mhm.
my family, my dogs, we eat and drink, cook with. Reverse osmosis is also a great way. You can get a
Mhm.
small countertop system for reverse osmosis. That's my second favorite way. But I'm pretty strict about the water that I drink. I don't drink bottled water
Yep.
out of plastic. I always have a stainless steel water bottle with distilled water in it.
I have distilled water, but mine is my favorite bottle is a glass bottle. I stopped using plastics about 5 years ago, and it was kind of by accident. I didn't know what I was doing, and then I found out later that actually that's a good practice to try not to use anything plastic, including plastic containers with your food. But getting back to the water and electrolytes, I understand the importance of electrolytes, but if you could explain to everyone why electrolytes are so important, especially during midlife.
Sodium potassium balance, it's the way water gets into the cell, right? To pass through that lipid cell membrane, there needs to be electrolytes. So if you look, they're generally sodium, potassium, some magnesium. They vary a little bit, right? Depending on what brand you're buying. You need to make sure you're not buying stuff with a bunch of artificial sweeteners, with artificial colors, with natural flavors. If you see that, run. Natural flavors means chemicals that are made up to taste like something like a banana,
I
right?
have to say something real quickly. Natural flavor. Just think about that for a minute. It doesn't make any sense, but because we see the natural, we're like, oh yeah. But yeah, how can you have a natural flavor? I mean, either it has it or it hasn't. I mean, either
You would just say banana. If there was banana in it, and then you would think to yourself, oh, it must taste a little like banana,
right, right,
not
no.
natural flavors. Yes, yes. Very misleading. We're very misled in this country. And if by midlife, if we're not reading labels, now is the time to start before we have grandbabies and we start bringing them into our homes and feeding them things that, have chemicals in bags and boxes. And like, it's time to start. It's time to start paying attention to personal care products, what we're using in and on our bodies, remembering that everything we put on our skin is absorbed,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
And it's
But
never too late to start making these changes.
absolutely. In fact, I know that in most cases, if you have a gut health issue, you can theoretically begin to heal your gut within 14 days. If and it doesn't take a whole lot of tweaking. But let's get back to the constipation thing. I know that there are quick fixes because those are causation. We were doing all the things for causes. And we have a tendency our whole medical system, healthcare system is built upon solving and taking care of symptoms and not necessarily pulling back the layers and finding out what the cause of those symptoms might be and then healing the cause. So someone who is constipated and they've taken, the quick fixes and they're okay for a while, but a couple of days later they're right back in there again. What's the first thing they need to do besides running to the drugstore and getting some X-Lax, which is terrible?
First thing you need to do is understand why.
Okay.
Because without understanding why, how can you fix it? I'm going to give you an example. You get in your car tomorrow morning and you start her up, and a big red light you've never seen before comes on the dashboard. You call up the shop and you say, "Hey, a light I've never seen is on the dashboard. What do I do?" And he says, "We'll bring it in. We'll run some tests." If they said to you, "Well, we're really not sure. We just pulled the plug on that light. It won't come back on. You're fine now." And you just drove that car away, what do you think would happen? So
Then,
when we band-aid our symptoms, whether it's a
mhm.
headache or whether it's a tumor, right, whatever it might be, and we're trying to band-aid it instead of figuring out why it's there, what's the message? A symptom is just a messenger. So if we're not figuring out why your car is broken and they send you on your merry way, you're headed for a breakdown. For people, if you have headaches and you get a drug that just takes away the pain, something's still brewing. The
Mhm.
reason that that headache was there is still brewing, and it might now come out as eczema. So now you've got these headaches that are much more mild because now you've got pain meds, but now you've got this raging eczema that you maybe take a steroid for or you put a cream on. Still hasn't stopped the inside problem. So then it shows up as wild UTI infections, right?
Mm.
All of that in Chinese medicine, which is where I study, is heat escaping the body. That's toxic heat.
Mm.
And so when we don't fix constipation, we are headed for more problems. Constipation backs up, toxins back up, right? And we are headed for problems. So the answer to your question is we need to know the why. There are 8 reasons beyond you had surgery, you have adhesions from having a C-section, anything that has been done to you that can, affected your bowels. There are 8 reasons that people are constipated. Number 1 is dehydration. People are having poops that look like goat pellets, generally are dehydrated. Those people might be drinking enough water, but it's not getting into their cells,
Mm.
right? So we start there. For a lot of people, hydration is a piece of the puzzle. So when we talk about the why, it's never really just one thing, right? So if you're hearing this and you're like, I don't drink enough water and my poop looks like that could be a part of the puzzle for you. Number 2 is diet. So not only the advice that Western Med gives, which is eat more fiber, which is great if you've got the good bugs in there that are going to help you break that down, right? And if not, we need to figure out what's missing so that you can start breaking down fibers. The good bacteria actually digest those fibers for you, right? So making sure we have enough fiber if we're digesting it properly is one. We talked about the power of gluten and dairy on the bowels. So we need to make sure that those are in check too when we talk about diet. And then we really just need to look at the amount of processed food we're eating, Glennis. In this country, diet is not good. Standard American diet, and I have clients that come in like this, breakfast is a bagel with cream cheese and a coffee. Lunch is 2 slices of pizza and a Coke, and dinner is a cheeseburger, fries, and a Sprite. On the regular, no fiber.
No,
Your poop is going to
there's
sit in your gut.
there's a reason. There's a reason why the pandemic attacked us the way that it did, is because we are unhealthy and our immune systems are seriously compromised, as is our gut health. And that's one of the main reasons. It wasn't just the fact that the government might have failed us. We failed our bodies in terms of how we eat, lack of exercise, not enough sleep, the stress within which we live our lives. All of those things contribute. So I hear you preaching to the choir over here.
Yes.
Although, given the fact that, we have to watch our processed foods and things that we're eating around that piece, it's hard for the average person to achieve all of that. But what I hear you saying, if you can do bits and pieces of some of this, it will be much better than not doing any. So, not to be overwhelmed, but to take a look at what you can do to make some incremental changes. And it could go a long way, right, Melissa, when you make those incremental
Yes.
changes?
Yes. If you're constipated starting today, cut out dairy for 30 days. That's it. See what that does for you. Dairy is anything that comes from a cow. It's yogurt, it's ice cream, it's milk, it's cheese, it's butter, right? All of that stuff. And you have to be really strict because it's really strong. That milk protein sticks around for a long time. So you need to get it all out of your system and you need to be really strict. But for some people, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. A huge piece. Another piece, so we talked about water. We
Mhm.
talked about diet. The next piece is stress and anxiety. So if you're like, could be for me, listen to this. I have a client. wakes up at 6:15 in the morning, jumps out of bed, runs to the shower, brushes her teeth in the shower, quick shave, jumps out, wraps her head in a towel, runs down, puts the coffee maker on, lets the dogs out, runs back upstairs, dries her hair, wakes the kids, runs back downstairs, grabs her coffee as she walks out the door, lets the kids in, gets in the car, and is at the train station at 6:43. There
I
was no
remember
time to
those
poop.
days.
There was
I
no
remember
time to poop.
the poop. Yep. I remember those days.
Yeah, that is what we are doing as a society. And so part of the work that I do with people is rebuilding lifestyles and making small changes. I always say simple changes, better choices. That's it. We're not trying to solve huge problems overnight. We're not going to get overwhelmed, like you said, right? But if that is you in the morning and you are not pooping, it's a great place to start making changes. It's free. You're going to get to bed a
Absolutely.
little earlier. You're going to wake up a little earlier. You're going to try to get into a relaxed morning. You're actually going to drink that coffee seated for 15 minutes, maybe in the sun, right?
Sometimes coffee can help your bowels move too.
And
I mean,
sometimes it can. Yeah. I recommend everybody start the day. The first thing you do in the morning is a large glass of water with the electrolytes before
yep.
coffee,
That's what
before anything else.
over the years, I learned not to drink coffee at least 2 to 3 hours after I've gotten up because of how it raises my cortisol levels, because the caffeine that's in it. So I just started switching out over time. I have about 16 ounces of water next to my bed with a lime in it. And I drink that every morning before I get up. And the other thing that I do, of course, now I work from home and have been for 17 years. Prior to that, I was a mess when it came to my routine. I have four little girls. They're now grown, but to give you an idea, they're all close in age. The oldest one is soon to be 40 and the youngest one is 32. So they're all close to age, basically pregnant for 10 years. And I was climbing the corporate ladder, traveling everywhere on my second marriage. And one day I woke up and, finally, you know how they say when you load up your closet and you open up the closet door one day and things are falling out, you push everything back in, right? And then one day you forget all that stuff is in there. And so you go and you open up the closet door and just all comes falling out. Well, that was me. A little bit of a tear ran the next morning, one morning, and all of a sudden it all came out and I could not put it back in. I ended up having to go to ER because tears were coming out of my eyes, but I was like, I'm fine. I'm okay. It's probably just an allergy, whatever. My family was like, Mom, something's wrong with you. My husband was like, what's going on? So come to find out, of course, I was exhausted. I also was suffering from an anxiety disorder. And I found out many years later that there were all kinds of reasons why I had the anxiety, post-traumatic stress, because of how I found out that my mom died. She was hit by a fire truck on her way to work. So that was really, traumatic. And I had just had a baby. And so my hormones were already interesting. The baby was 5 weeks and I had a 17-month-old also. So I hadn't really gotten over that pregnancy either, because when you have them close together like that, that's great in some ways, but really hard on getting a hormonal balance when you do that. So I had that going on. And then, of course, I was climbing the corporate ladder, traveling all the time and not dealing with any of my emotions. I was a dancer part time, and I would always have rehearsals and things. While the girls were at one rehearsal, I was at my rehearsal, all these things. Now, they were eating healthy because I knew better. I was a nutrition minor in college. So they were eating healthy. I was cooking everything from scratch. I would get home with my heels still on, my suit still on, drop my Franklin planner and run and start doing all fresh food dinner, running baths, helping with homework. My husband would be sitting down watching the evening news, which is the reason why we ended up divorcing, and I'm right around doing all this stuff. And finally, I hit the wall at 51 and I had to make some decisions. And one of the decisions I made was, first of all, to leave corporate America, but I began to build my own morning. It started with the mornings, my own morning routine that was just mine, because I never had my mornings. For years, I didn't have them because they were all belonged to the girls. But now I wake up in the morning, I drink my water, I do some gratitude journaling, I go for a walk, I have my protein smoothie. I do my prayer line, and then I might drink a cup of coffee, and then I'm ready for work. But it took me a long time to figure out what works for me. But I knew that I had to do something because it was important. I feel like I saved my life. A lot of people say, well, wow, you don't look 67. But I guarantee you, if I had continued living that way, I would probably look if I was still alive, I would probably look exactly my age and then some. But it started with making a decision to leave my job. But the other part was incremental changes over time and figuring out what works for you. So I really like the idea that you talked about that morning because so many women don't give themselves permission to take care of themselves in the morning.
Well, at all, at all. So this is it, ladies. This is it. If this is midlife and you've launched your kids and you've got your mornings back, this is the time. This is the time to find the joy that Linus and I have found in the mornings. Because I am an early riser. I get up between 5 and 6 in the morning, and it is glorious. I
I
also go to bed
know. Oh my
at
gosh.
9 o'clock, but
Yeah.
there's nothing for me at night. The nighttime, there's nothing exciting. My life starts, I love a quiet morning and it's exciting. And I do my little journaling and all the work that I do. And then I make my coffee and get started with my day. But, usually at 7. But take your mornings back. Now is the time. Midlife is the time to take it back, because if you're not getting healthy now, if you've struggled, you've raised your kids, you poured from your cup that is now empty, now is the time to fill it, because on the other side, it's not so great. All these chronic diseases are popping up. Talk to your friends that are on 4 and 5 medications. It's not fun, but it starts now. It starts today.
It starts now. And it's never too late to make those small incremental changes. And I know I kind of side swiped you and you were going down your list. So let's get back to your list. We've
So we
talked
talked
about
about stress.
the morning,
We
the
talked
stress and anxiety. Go ahead.
So we talked about water, we talked about diet, we talked about stress and anxiety. A big one that's often overlooked is just general medications. We just said people are on 4 and 5 medications. A lot of those, even birth control pills, can be very constipating for people. So if you're listening and you're constipated and you have a litany of medications, talk to your prescribing doctor. Explain that you're constipated, that you want to poop every day. Because if he says 3 times a week is fine, it's not.
It's
It's
not.
not. You need to be pooping daily. But there are medication switches that can happen. There are sometimes they can move you to a different medication that has the same effect, that has less constipating qualities. So that's something to think about. We always talk about that first, because if you're taking a drug that's constipating you and you're trying to fix your constipation, you're going to be banging your head against a wall, right? The next one is a sluggish liver. We between the high fructose corn syrup and the processed foods and the amount of alcohol we're drinking in this country, there is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease rampant. When your liver cells swell, the bile that's being produced isn't getting out. Without that bile, we're not grabbing onto toxins, and the liver's not able to really do its job. Without that bile, the quality of your poop. So we need liver and gallbladder to be doing their jobs. And sometimes it's as easy as in Chinese medicine, we say tonifying the kidney and liver. There's plenty of herbs that really just help to support that function. So we just take a look at that. For a lot of people, that's a piece. And of course, we don't just take a medication. We look to lifestyle. So if you're drinking too much, you need to change your habits. If your life is full of processed foods and high fructose corn syrup, you're drinking soda every day, we need to change habits. It's as simple and complex as that. Let's see. Reason number 5, low minerals. We know magnesium has a direct effect on the bowels. Magnesium citrate will produce a bowel movement if you take enough, and sometimes violently. So don't take too much magnesium citrate. But all of us are low in magnesium. I've yet to see somebody who's been tested that has an adequate level of magnesium. Not only that, but the rest of the minerals are essential too. So if we don't have enough minerals, we don't have enough energy. If we don't have enough energy, we can't contract muscles. Without contractions in the bowels, we can't poop.
Interesting.
So for almost everybody, every single person I work with goes on a multi-mineral supplement. It's that important. We used to get a decent amount of minerals and we were more worried about vitamins. Multivitamins were all the rage. Now it should be a multi-mineral. That should be what we are all taking. Our soil is very depleted of minerals.
Mhm.
They talk about the orange that you ate versus the orange that your grandmom ate. It's
Very
not the same.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're like, I've never taken minerals. I've never considered taking minerals. Take a multi-mineral supplement and see. It can also make a huge difference in your energy level.
Absolutely. In fact, I wanted to put a plug in there for something that I've been using that has really helped me quite a bit, and that's Shilajit. Are you familiar with Shilajit? That
Yep.
has so many minerals, probably as many minerals as what's in a multi-mineral complex. Now, it doesn't taste that great. You definitely want to get the black clay type sticky form and not one that's been processed, but you want to get in the form in almost like a clay form. And I just put a little bit of hot water. That's what I drink in lieu of my coffee first thing in the morning because I still wanted to have something hot. And I used to be a big tea drinker back in the day, but a lot of times what happens as we age, our taste buds change. And sometimes the taste buds change for a reason, because sometimes your body will give you certain clues, like, okay, you don't need to be doing that anymore. Try doing this. So I kind of stopped drinking some of the teas I used to drink and I replaced it with the Shilajit and I use some in the morning and that really does help. Now, the last time I had my panels drawn, the one mineral that I was deficient in, of course, was magnesium, so I had to take a supplement for that. But the other ones I was doing okay, even zinc, which sometimes is another one that we have a tendency to be low on. But Shilajit is something that I've used. I'm just sharing with everybody. I always say that I'm just sharing this with you. I'm not saying that you have to do this, but this is something you might want to take a look at because I believe, Melissa, that we have to have various kinds of things in our toolkit for our health. Some of those things work fine for a while, and then something changes our environment, the chemical makeup of our bodies, our hormones, whatever, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't seem to work anymore. That's okay because the good thing is that if you have been gathering knowledge and checking things out, you're aware of maybe something else that you can do. And another thing I wanted to say too about gathering this knowledge, it's great to be listening to this podcast. It's great to be taking notes. It's great to be getting all this information. That gives you power. But acting on the information that you have, actually contacting Melissa and scheduling a consult, actually doing some of the things that she's suggesting, that's powerful because that's when you're going to actually get the results. And what happens a lot of times is not that we know better, we just don't do better because it means making change. And I know that change can sometimes be difficult, but it can be so much more worth it.
If you're not, what you're doing isn't working, you've got to try something else. And you can't continue to just try things without knowing the why. That I always come back to the why because otherwise you're guessing. You can guess at what, you're going to listen to me list the rest of the causes and you can be like, maybe it's that, maybe it's that, maybe it's that. Or you work with someone and you do some gut testing. And we're going to talk about gut testing in a second. And you get a true picture of actually what's going on. And then you've got a framework for healing. But if you don't know what's happening, how can you fix it? Right now, you might know you're constipated, but that's it because most doctors will tell you, we don't know why. Just take this medication, right? So maybe it's the food, maybe it's the water, maybe it's the liver, maybe it's the anxiety, maybe it's other medications, maybe it's the minerals. Number
Mhm.
7, maybe it's mold and parasites.
That's a big one.
Something not talked about again a lot. Sick building syndrome. If you live in a house where you are using Febreze and air fresheners and Glade scented plugins because something is smelling funky, you got to figure out what's smelling funky, right? It's the same as functional medicine in this house situation. If you continue to cover it up with Glade plugins and air fresheners, that problem's just getting worse.
Yeah.
Same thing with your body. If you just keep covering up with Band-Aids and medications, something's brewing. Right? So we need to look for mold in our house. I encourage everybody who says, maybe I have a mold problem. If you've seen something, if you have water stains, if there is a definitive mildew smell, or if you go into your bathroom and you lift the back of the toilet off and you
Hmm.
look in that well and there is black mold, you have a mold problem. Because what it's telling us is there are mold spores in the air and mold spores grow on water. And that's one place in your house that you have standing water. And so that's a great place to check to see if you have a mold problem that would need remediation. But mold shuts down your bowels. Most people will be completely constipated if they've had a toxic mold exposure that they haven't gotten over. There are ways to release it from your body and to detox, but it should be considered if, we need to figure out whether that's an underlying root cause for your constipation. And the same thing with parasites. And unfortunately, there are no good testing for parasites because parasites they don't hang out in your intestines. They live in your tissues. So it's not like you could have a colonoscopy and the doctor's going to be like, oh, I see a lot of parasite. In fact, I had a colonoscopy and made the mistake of asking my doctor to look for parasites, and he smirked at me, and then did a parasite cleanse 6 months later and passed a massive tapeworm myself.
Mm,
Saw it with my own eyes. And
wow.
so that's showing you that they don't live right sort of in the digestive tract. They live in the tissues. But you can imagine if you're full of parasites, that tube goes from being nice and wide with poop passing through to kind of squished. You've got swollen tissues. So we need to get parasites out if that's the case. I will also say that anybody that I've worked with that has done a parasite cleanse, 100% of people have seen parasites in their stool.
Oh
They have.
yeah, most human beings do. Even if you are a vegetarian, you all the ifs. I mean, look at you. You are a wellness expert and passionate about gut health, and you had a tapeworm.
I had lots of different worms. I have lots of pictures. And my
Wow,
clients
that's
send me what they're passing. They send pictures, and it's astounding. It's
yeah,
astounding that
that's
we're living
interesting
this age.
too. But if you pass the stool and you look in the thing and something seems to be moving, I would definitely.
Not moving. By the time they come out, they're dead. So the
Okay,
parents,
so you may not see them moving in the stool. Okay.
you won't see them moving in the stool. They'll be dead when they come out. So it's not super horrific. And I have plenty of clients that don't want to look. And that's
Mhm.
fine too. I mean, but if you've got a parasitic issue, you're not going to be pooping well. Not only that, but you're going to be extremely nutrient deficient and probably fatigued over time because those parasites snatch up all the nutrients. They also do some good things. They're also going after your radioactive elements. It's the only way that we're pulling radioactive elements and storing them in our body. The parasites are eating those up. They're also eating up Lyme disease or any kind of bacterial infection you might have. They're eating up heavy metals. So they do have a purpose, but we want to keep them at a very low level, right? The Native Americans cleansed regularly, and we sort of have lost that. In India, they're still cleansing regularly, and we just don't do it in this country. It's a shame. We should be.
When you say cleansing, are you talking about detoxing? When you said cleansing, what do you
I'm
mean?
talking about parasite cleansing. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
talking about
parasite
using
cleansing. Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
using products to really work on cleansing mostly the digestive tract to start. And yeah, an herbal, a mix of herbs and some binders, right? Support the body while we're encouraging the body to kill the parasites and let them go. But we can't do a parasite cleanse until people are pooping better. So if you're constipated, even if you've got parasites, we can't just go right for parasite cleansing because imagine you're killing parasites. They're going to sit in your colon dead,
Mm.
releasing the contents of their guts. You need to get that out. You don't want that reabsorbed. So we do work to move the bowels regularly before we start a parasite cleanse. So that's number 7 is really mold and parasites. And then number 8 is just gut dysbiosis. And you don't know what's going on in the gut until you test. And so we do a simple at-home stool test. You get a kit sent to your house, you do it in your bathroom, you send it back via FedEx, like no embarrassment, right? No muss, no fuss, no expensive doctor's appointment. And you will get a 5-page test back, which is remarkable. It tells you everything that's going on in your gut. It tells you all the bad guys, whether they're there. It looks for H. pylori, which can be a cause of constipation because H. pylori, though it affects your stomach, it reduces your stomach acid. And without enough stomach acid, you're not digesting your food. And when undigested food makes it into your gut, it's hard for it to process and takes longer, which winds up with constipation. So it tells us about that. It looks for viral pathogens like adenovirus and norovirus. If you've recently been sick and it was viral, this would pick that up. It looks for inflammatory and autoimmune related bacteria. You know, a lot of these autoimmune diseases are starting in our gut
Mm.
and can be traced back to bad bacteria in the gut. Eradicate the bacteria, lose the symptoms. I see rheumatoid arthritis reversed all the time. But we have to be thinking about the gut and taking care of the gut when we see autoimmune diseases and skin conditions. The test also tests for fungi and candida, which is a problem
Mhm.
for a lot of people, viruses like cytomegalovirus and Epstein-Barr. And then it takes a good look at all the bacteria that are supposed to be there. And it tells you what your levels are. And then based on that, you'll know maybe you need more lactobacillus. Maybe you're low in Akkermansia, and you can take that specific supplement instead of guessing with a general probiotic, right? We know exactly what needs to be replaced. And the coolest part of the test for me as a gut health expert is the intestinal health markers. which tell me how strong your stomach acid is, how well are you digesting proteins and fats. It tells me, your immune system starts in your gut. There's a secretory IgA level. So it'll tell me, how is your immune system in your gut? It'll tell me if you're sensitive to gluten. A lot of people will come in and say, oh, no, I have no problems with gluten. But we take this test and their numbers off the chart, which is causing tons of inflammation in the body. And that
Right.
also gets picked up on the test. So it's beautiful, and it gives us an even better framework, because now we know exactly which bugs we need to kill, which things we need to replace, what needs repairing. And then we've got that framework.
And let me just say that it's really important to address this issue with gut health, because it can really govern so many other things that are going on with your body. As you enter into menopause, one of the things that women complain about is brain fog. Well, if you have an unhealthy gut, the chances of you having even more brain fog multiplies, because that nerve that stretches into the gut, into the brain, it's going to take the blood supply to the brain, and the blood is going to be full of whatever is down there in the gut. And if you have an unhealthy gut, then you're going to have brain fog. And if you're already going to menopause, then it's a double whammy of even more brain fog. And it's really amazing too, because that also could be one of the reasons why people are, like we kind of touched upon this earlier, feeling anxiety, depression. So much of that can be rooted in the gut. Now, we could talk about this forever, but I really want all of you listeners, I talked about the fact that, acting on information is powerful. I need you to contact Melissa Hall and say your last name, Klepacki.
Klepacki,
Klepacki,
yes,
yes.
tough one.
I'm going to have her link is in the show page there. Go ahead and contact her and find out about her services. This is something that you don't want to set on. And actually, this is the first gut health expert we've had on this year. So therefore, start your year out right. Find out what's going on. Remember, knowledge is power, and acting on it is powerful. And also think about how much better you're going to feel. I know that some of this can be intimidating, overwhelming, maybe even scary. But once you find out what's going on, then you're working with someone that can tell you what you need to do about it. It's not like there's not solutions for some of these things that we're feeling. I know that just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was so gassy. I couldn't figure out. In my mind, I'm thinking I haven't eaten anything differently than I have before. Da, 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 da. Then I began to start writing a food log to figure out, what it was. And it was something that before I could eat no problem, but now something's changed. I can no longer eat my favorite yogurt. I just can't. I just can't. Now, if butter doesn't seem to bother me, other things with lactose doesn't seem to bother me, but I just can't do the yogurt. And that was the first thing I thought, oh no, it's not that, because I've been eating that for years. But remember, I said earlier, things change and your body does talk to you, but you got to listen. You got to listen instead of trying to figure out a way to shut it up.
Yes. Yes. Don't put gut duct tape over that red light, right?
That's right.
On your dashboard.
Yeah.
Do not ignore
It's
it.
there to aid you, not to scare you, but to aid you, saying, okay, something's going on. I said that this is really weird. My husband would say I was passing gas and at nighttime and all this stuff. I'd wake up and he would be spraying. I said, oh my God, don't spray that stuff in here. I hate Lysol spray. I hate it with a passion.
Yes.
So anyway, that's what it was. And as
Yeah.
soon as I stopped doing that, within a week, that stopped as well. And before, not a problem. And supposedly Greek yogurt is good for gut health, but I just have to find something else. I substituted it with sauerkraut. Now sauerkraut's my best friend.
Oh,
Um,
great. Good
yeah,
choice.
I do. I eat sauerkraut all the time. It's an acquired taste, but now I crave it. And that's the other thing too. Many times as you're making these lifestyle changes and you settle on something that seems to work for you, you'll find that your body will let you know that it's working, because you'll begin to crave that thing. And you'll let go of other things that aren't good for you. You'll stop having a taste for some of those things. When you start correcting and finding out what's going on with you, it's amazing how the cravings for bad stuff stops, because you've addressed what was causing the craving in the first place. And the next thing you know, and it's a great way to drop weight in a healthy way by taking a look at your gut health instead of trying to do all these quick diets and everything else. The answer to weight loss, I feel, in many cases, is in the gut. It really is. It's all about what you put in your mouth.
Whole foods, nourish yourself.
Nourish
right? Food
yourself.
is to nourish yourself. And you need to be
Absolutely.
considering that when you take a look at what's on your plate. Is this nourishing me?
Right. And
Yeah.
many times you look at that, if it talks back to you and say no, then you know you got an issue.
And
Melissa,
sometimes
thank
that
you.
happens. And sometimes that happens, right? And so
Right,
then we just make a
exactly.
better choice the next time. That's it.
Absolutely. Not going for perfection, just going for awareness and beginning to make those incremental lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
Melissa, thank you so much for being on the Vibe Living podcast. It's been wonderful having you here today.
Yes, Linus, I enjoyed it so much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for listening. If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And take a look at the over 107 episodes that we've had over the last year. We have more coming up in 2025, but wherever you might listen to this, maybe by 2027, who knows? But I'm so glad that you stopped through. And don't forget to click on the link of Melissa's information and also check out the Vibe Living Women Network. That is my network of a prescription program or subscription program where we have 18 experts in the field of health and wellness that write blogs. They also do workshops that are free, and they also have online courses on this site. So take a look at the Vibe Wellness Woman Network. It is probably one of the best investments you will make in your health. It is not expensive at all and can add so much value. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Vibe Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.